Hey everyone. In this episode, we had some background noise that was a little difficult to edit. We apologize for any inconvenience. Hey everybody, welcome to a new episode of the Low Code Approach. I'm Sean Feeney, a senior product marketing manager on the Power Platform team. Today I'm joined by...
I'm Wendy Haddad. I'm a senior cloud solution architect and a former Microsoft customer, and I am joined by
Ken Aguilar.
Whoa.
the man, the myth, the legend,
He actually gave his last name today. He's feeling generous.
007. Well, we are so excited. We have Aisha Hasan here from Microsoft Digital. That's our Microsoft IT team. And we are here all to talk about governance for the Power Platform and specifically about governing agents. So, Aisha, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to actually finally make it to the podcast. I feel so honored and so excited and giddy. But yeah, all the podcasts are amazing. I listen to them all the time. So I'm happy to be here. And let's talk about, governance, agents, and all the good stuff.
Awesome. Well, hey, we had Leanne on for one of our more popular episodes. I think everyone's always curious, how does Microsoft Digital govern these tools, or how does Microsoft govern these tools, right? And before we get into what you're actually doing, can you just explain, just kind of refresh a little bit about how your team works, what role you play on the team for Microsoft? We'll get you in that position.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So yes, Leanne and I are actually part of the same team. So Leanne decided to leave Microsoft and go and work on another better opportunity for her. Good for her. But yeah, so we're part of the same team in Microsoft Digital, and our team is basically responsible for managing and governing Microsoft's internal tenant, which is Microsoft's employees are also Microsoft's biggest and the largest customer base. So we are what we call as customer zero for all of Power Platform, Copilot Studio, Agent Builder, so all the good stuff. So Leanne passed the baton on me, and I am now taking the lead in a lot of stuff that Leanne was doing. But essentially, we both worked up together on all of the governance aspect. I had other stuff too, so she was more in the lead role, but now it's on me. So yeah, we miss Leanne very much every day.
I'm sure. I know how much it is to govern that tool. It's huge. So I feel for you a little bit. And hi, Leanne. Sorry if you're listening to this. We'll just give you a major guilt trip, but we miss you. But Aisha, real fast, before Ken and Sean jump in with questions, I wanted to get a sense of scale because last time Leanne was on, she gave us a sense of how many apps, how many flows. Now we have agents. So can you give us a sense of scale with the Power Platform and what you're governing?
Oh boy, yeah. I mean, I think that the tenant just continues to grow more and more and more. I feel like every time you blink, we have like another 2,000, 3,000 environments in there. But as of just about a week ago, we are more than 80,000 environments in the tenant. We have an upward of 300,000 Power Apps, around maybe 500, 600K flows. And then with agent, it's just sprawling, especially if you start to look at the extensibility landscape, which covers both Copilot Studio agents, agents that are also created in Agent Builder. We have a significant number, which are individually created agents, probably around 20,000 or so. And then we have line of business agents that are either the teams are creating for broader use or the ones that we are putting them as first party so our customers can use as well. So those are sitting at something around 5 to 6,000 as well. But it's growing, and it's just both heartening and a little bit scary at times to see that the exponential growth, but we're also pretty excited. And that's where we rely on the product team, especially Ken's team, a lot to help us continue to maintain that momentum and help us scale further, as we continue to grow in the agent space.
That's a lot.
Huge.
Like, that's just a lot. Like, it's amazing. Now, there's a really interesting dynamic between Microsoft Digital and our amazing host, Ken, where you guys and Ken get to talk a lot about governance strategies and tooling within Power Platform and help make things amazing. And over the past couple of months, we've put out a whole bunch of features and frameworks for governance and security of Power Platform, agents inclusive, such as managed availability, managed operations, managed governance, managed security. And I'm hoping to give us some insight in how those strategies, how the tooling in the new updated Power Platform Admin Center has helped Microsoft Digital with their rollout and adoption and just overall governance of agents across Microsoft.
Well, I mean, to say that it has helped tremendously is definitely going to be understatement because just in the last year, with all the different and cool stuff that the government, admin, and scale team just definitely put us in a much better spot to accelerate adoption. Before we had any of these tools available, there was a lot of IT glue that we had built, which we'd continue to manage. And also, of course, we would have to really try to figure out as to how do we strike that balance because the growth still is surpassing the speed at which we're able to not only just scale but manage, which is the time to react and time to react to in terms of like outages or any kind of other issues, and also the fact that time to react to the new features that are coming in. So all of that would dwarf in comparison to the just some of the latencies that we would have with the IT glue that we built. So when we start to look at all of these managed, basically the suite of features that we've gotten from the product team, speaking for managed governance itself, the whole aspects of like our entire trend strategy is based on groups and roles. That's how we played our invite
Hmm.
strategy. And that has helped tremendously with the management of agent. We have actually been able to adopt groups and roles truly in the sense of the way that without that, our agent sprawl would be that. Now it's a spread and not a sprawl, which means we do have a better visibility onto what people are building. With that, of course, our auditing and inventory is improving as well. It still has some ways to go, but we have a better visibility in terms of what people are building, what the life cycle that we want to approach. And one of the other things is like little things in from the managed governance perspective, but which helps us just try to help the maker build it right in the first place are what are some of those guidelines and guidances that we can put up front. So it's user education where managed governance features are helping us quite a bit. Then it's the proactive governance of what kind of rules that we can apply and let people sort of build right in the first place. And then we have the reactive governance where a lot of like our inventory and auditing comes place. Managed security is another interesting one, which is we are still diving deeper into that as to how do we marry that up with some of the reactive controls that we have in terms of like filters hub, our own attestation policies, and also any of the third party tools that our security organization is using. So that is something which I think we have a little bit more work to do there. But managed governance, hats down, we wouldn't have been able to have much of the success that we have now without some of the capabilities we got from the product group.
Clip that.
So let's get into the weeds. Let's get into the dirt here. Let's talk about operationalizing agents and how do we actually do that here at Microsoft. So, do we just let folks create them? Do we approve them? What is the actual process?
Great question. So it started out, how do we let people build agents? It started out very painfully because of the fact that, of course, we had a lot of different aspects of the product that we still were trying to evaluate and to assess the risk from a both security and a compliance perspective. And then the other big aspect of that is Microsoft's global. So we also have these individualized compliance requirements that come in once you get outside of the United States. So all of those things actually did factor in quite a bit into how you just actually let folk build agents. And those requirements come into maybe a little bit more complex as compared to apps and flows of the fact that there's the AI component involved. So when you look at all of those, that entire sort of the suite of requirements, and then you compare that with the product, that's the state that it was in, it was an interesting challenge where we started out. But I would say that we have gotten much better. So the way that we let actually folks build agent is that we do allow self-service because we do want the innovation to actually continue and get better. So the self-service aspect of that is that, users can go create a personal developer environment right now, specifically for Copilot Studio. And what that does is we have our own automation kicked in the background that kicks in, gives them certain connectors, and which means they're able to build a declarative agent or even a custom agent with no Copilot specific aspects such as knowledge bases, knowledge sources, publishing, and as well as some of our more popular first party connectors with some condensed list of actions, predominantly read actions. But this is 100% self service, which is they do not need to go through an admin for approval. There is no review required from compliance or an RAI perspective. People build in, they wait for the policy to kick in, and then they're able to build their agents, publish it, and also share it. So thank you, Ken, for the sharing limits. So that's the self-service path that we have. Then we also have the what we call it the custom agent path, which is a little bit more dependent on the IT admin lane, because the custom agents are what we consider as like pro dev or enterprise apps where users want to build an agent which is impactful. They're ultimately looking into sharing it broadly, publishing it to the tenant, or potentially make it actually a first party product as well that we can then sell to our customers. Those require a little bit more rigor, which is the app users can go create an environment, and by default they actually get a standard policy which has a lot of connectors but not some of the ones required for Copilot. But then we also don't mandate any kind of compliance review at that time. All they need is make sure that their enterprise app is registered in our product catalog and service tree, and they can start up with Sandbox with some sharing limits apply. Then we have an internal tool where they can go and request specific connectors, and that's it. So the sharing limits really have helped us to drive that innovation. Where if you're just starting to build out and you don't have a really good idea in terms of the type of agent you want to build, you can get started pretty quickly without having to go through any kind of major compliance. And then when you need to go to production, that's when by policy we do require a little bit more rigor, such as security development life cycles, privacy reviews, RAI, which are dependent pretty much on the maker's organization that their organization's processes require. For Microsoft Digital, we are sort of, since we are the data controller, our responsibility lies validating that maker and their organization collectively have agreed that this solution is good to go. It's not going to expose data and all of that good stuff. So that's what we do today. Where we're moving forward is to continue to iterate the path on self service, where since we have environment routing available for Copilot Studio, we are pretty close to opening up personal developer environments for to be able to build more impactful agents, which is a significantly broader range of connectors for first party as well as other ones that are critical for productivity, and also allow more Copilot Studio specific connectors, publishing, being able to connect to SharePoint for knowledge and public URLs and all of that. So we're pretty excited about it because I think that's going to start to make a much larger difference in our entire agent landscape.
All right, let's dive a little bit deeper. Common question that we hear from customers, or maybe not question, but comment is, I really want to start using agents, but I'm scared of my data and the access to my data. And my response to them usually is, okay, well, what are you doing to secure your data right now? Because it doesn't matter if it's an agent, a Power App, automation, or just a file system. It's only as good as the security that's already there on the data itself. So how does Microsoft secure its data and handle that?
Great question. Yeah, and also a trick question, and he's trapping me, but okay. All right, I'll answer. Dude, that's actually basically the fundamental argument, isn't it? Right? That if I'm able to get to a Word document somehow, be able to like copy paste confidential information from there, then why is an agent any different? And it's a valid premise, but if you look at from a maturity perspective, right, there are a lot of what we call is like the proactive controls that are already in place when it comes down to being able to use some of our M365 products, right? We have labeling, and the labeling, when enforced, it does prevent from unauthorized access to a certain extent, right? I think the Uber scenario, which where it doesn't matter really, is if there was a hacker on it or a threat or attack, then anything is pretty much game. So that's where it really comes down to it, what we have in terms of the tenant security policies in place. But when we start talking about agents specifically, so the good thing where we have sort of what's comparable to ChatGPT for Microsoft, like the declarative agents, is that as long as the data is sourced from anything which is part of the M365, those protections do carry over from mostly from the declarative agent side of the house. So if you're using highly confidential data, let's say from SharePoint, that type of labeling would be inherited, and it would also notify the user that whatever data that you have right now stable, then it's highly confidential, and then it becomes sort of like a maker responsibility to make sure that it doesn't get exploited. When it comes to Power Platform, and especially with Copilot Studio right now, we know that information protection is it's one of the areas where the product still has a lot of work to do. It's getting better, but it still is one of those gaps. So when we look at why those gaps existed in apps and flows, but now all of a sudden they're a bigger deal in Asian, is just two sides of that. One is the scale, right? And then the volume. And then the third thing is more about the reach. So when we start talking about agents, we have a lot more agents and the speed that they're being built than we ever did from an apps and flows perspective. The second is that with agents, a lot of business scenarios also call for an agent to be effective where you do want a larger audience to be able to interact with it. So that's where some of the authentication scenarios come in. So if a valid business scenario, if I'm putting an agent on learn.microsoft.com, my goal is going to be that any person on the planet should be able to interact with that agent and be able to learn more. And in that type of scenario, of course, you can never, enforce authentication. And so how do you protect those agents like that? And that's where really the data protection will come in, that how do we make sure that the agent is not accessing any data which is outside the scope of that particular business use? Because it's a valid business scenario to be able to go to learn.microsoft.com and get more information about all the content there without having to ever log in and all of that, right? So there are things that are built into the product now, thank you, that are helping, but we still have a long way to go. And some of those scenarios is risk acceptance, right? Where we try very hard, but of course, there's no possible way we can ever proactively manage all of the risky scenarios or threats that our tenant might have. But making sure that we isolate agents that have uses such as anonymous or authenticated bots. We enforce data protection as much as we can via policies, user education, and also limit what knowledge sources the agents can access. And then some of the features that we're super excited about that are coming is maybe build time and runtime scanning to be able to detect anything malicious that the agent is trying to do. So those are some of the things that we have, but it's a challenge. It's not that, anybody has it down 100%. And we are still nascent, very, nascent and early stages in our AI journey. So we are figuring it out along with our customers too.
So what I heard a lot. One, we have very advanced controls over agents. I also heard that agents do respect a lot of the access controls. So meaning if I don't have access to the data or a way to lock down the data, I also have ways. So I can use the access controls on things that I can authenticate to, but if I can't authenticate to it and it's just a open knowledge source like something on the web, I can use data policies to allow or restrict my access, my company's access, or the agent's access to those particular data sources. Wendy, anything more to add?
I have about 5 questions to follow up. So I'm trying to take them in order, or at least the most biggest one. But you kind of alluded a little bit to how you're or evaluating risk, but you said it at a high level. And I think that this is another thing that our customers wrestle with is, do I need to review every single agent? Who owns that review or that risk? How do I determine my risk tolerance? So, how are you thinking about that as Microsoft, and what do you usually recommend?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that fundamental, there's like no right or wrong answer to that. And a lot of it is depends upon the maturity curve as we speak and the type of the businesses that the customers have, right? So when we look at in terms of large enterprises, they have very similar concerns as we do inside Microsoft, right? Which is that just volume and scale and the fact that the data is all this mixed bag, right? So how do we actually make sure that at an enterprise level, if we can get enough policies in place based on risk that we can't possibly look at every single agent. But how do we aggregate those scenarios, determine the risk profile, and then put policies and controls in place so we are measuring and managing based on the categories or buckets of scenarios, right? So when we talk in terms of the maturity, we in Microsoft Digital are probably, excuse me, a little bit more risk aware because we also have the absolute privilege of being able to get a closer look on some of the upcoming features and enhancement than our customers do. So because of that, we are constantly adjusting our risk profile as well. But some of the scenarios that we look at and the criteria that we determine the risk is really what are the prevailing business scenarios for our employees, right? And based on those scenarios, what are some of the common data sources that we think that our employees are going to be targeting more compared to the others? And then how far out the reach is going to be for those agents and for that data. And when you look at all of those three things, then we look at compare it to what is available in the product today that helps us guardrail on those three criteria that I mentioned. And wherever there's a gap, that's where we define that is this something that we allow more broadly, or is it something that we put in into a more controlled state? So if you look at the public facing example, if I can continue on that, we all understand that it's a really big strategic advantage, and it's really just it ties well into our mission, right? Empower every person on the planet to be their best selves, because we do want everyone to be able to just be able to interact with that agent and get the most out. But then there is a bigger risk of that, which is it is a completely anonymous or unauthenticated bot. And so with that in place, we make sure that proactively that agent is contained in an environment where nothing else is being built, right? We take a very closer look in terms of what other connectors that are going into that agent, and in an environment no other resources being built. We apply policies and then our governance to lock it down in terms of access to that environment as well. How many system admins or makers are there? And then reactively, of course, our scanning, auditing, and inventory, and being able to detect if in case there is something malicious or suspicious going on with that agent. Now, when we look at it, and I'll give you another example. Internally, of course, SharePoint is a very popular and for right reason data source that majority of the employees want to build agent where they can just go over multiple SharePoints, summarize, and be able to either generate data or do a lot more things to help with their productivity. From that perspective, the great thing is that the product access controls they come in and our backs are respected. So if someone is building an agent and they have any site on the SharePoint that's in our tenant as an audit source, then if that site is not available or somebody doesn't have access to it, then of course they're not going to be able to get that results back. And then the other side of it is in terms of data protection is interactions, AI interactions with the agents, those are critical. So while we understand that there's a big part of those interactions that could be used to improve, we also gauge who actually can have access to those chat transcripts for the very same reason that that increases the risk being able to get access to that data and then exploitate out. It's a journey. We continuously evolve, but it's a journey that we can't be alone on as we continue to expand our tenant. We do need more and more in product controls, and we need those controls to be more proactive than reactive. It's gotten a lot better, but we're looking forward to where we go next from here.
Two things. One, do you live near an airport?
I live near an Air Force base, Langley.
Oh, okay. Got it. All right. All right. And now for a real question. So we've touched on governance controls, we've touched on data protection controls. One area I like to get a little bit deeper on is reporting and monitoring, right? Tell me more about what type of visibility and what tools does Microsoft IT, Microsoft Digital use to understand the landscape of agents across Microsoft? How do they manage it from a visibility standpoint?
Very, very painfully today. And that's one of the areas that we would definitely like to get more traction on it. So, strategically speaking, I think that one of the areas where we still have a little bit more work to do is how do we make sure that every time anything new and fun and great, innovative, it rolls out also with the corresponding controls on the governance side. And that all comes down to is that, being able to see who is doing what and being able to then govern based on that insights and then metadata. So we have a few tools that we have built internally as part of our own IT glue, where we are collecting inventory of entire Power Platform landscape in the tenant. It takes a really long time, by the way, to get all of that data. And then on the basis of that is where we also do our reactive governance through our attestation policies and all of that. We want agents to be part of that landscape, but inventory still needs some work. But what we ultimately would like to do is have Resource Explorer in Power Platform Admin Center to come up to scale, be more real time, and be able to actually render that kind of results for us. Because theoretically, if I'm an admin, it's with Microsoft, we are fortunate that some of these things that we get to build for enterprise because we also know that our tenant is huge, right? But when you look at it from any other customer standpoint, they may or not have that same rigor, might not have an IT department or the resources. And that's where we would like to get to as well, because it's still an overhead, right? The more that our tenant grows, it's not only just a scale problem, but it's also a resource problem that we have to continue to invest in our own tooling to be able to get visibility. So right now, that's what's working. It's a combination between what in Microsoft Digital have built, what our security counterparts are able to see in Purview and in Sentinel, and then a combination of that, we get into whatever we can look at from a visibility perspective and turn into reporting. But my nirvana is I should be able to get that from Resource Explorer and some other out of the box reporting in Power Platform Admin Center.
Well, another thing I want to get to is I've definitely felt this since coming back from leave, but I'm sure you've been living this for the last several months is the worlds are colliding, right, between the admin centers. And we asked this question previously to Leanne, but that was even before everything with Copilot. And now you're talking about Purview and Sentinel and all of these amazing features that we've released. Clarifying question. You are not a Purview admin at Microsoft, correct? Or you're
Oh
not a
no,
SharePoint
thankfully no.
admin?
No,
Well,
thankfully
so
no.
that I know, right? But that adds complexity because if
Oh
you're not
yes.
the admin over the tool, so practically, how are you collaborating with them to between your different admin centers and products to get to a secure governance solution?
Excellent, excellent, excellent question. It is something which, as much as we know, we would like to say that we really have it down and we have maturity, honestly, we don't. We are struggling with a challenge right now internally, but then it's also providing an excellent opportunity to sort of look at the fundamental existence of these different admin centers and how do we actually stretch it up further. So one example that I can give you where all of this is sort of looking to converge is when we look at the extensibility and agent landscape, the idea really is to be able to have that single pane of glass view and meet folks where they're most comfortable and most sort of productive in terms of tooling and collaboration, right? So if I would spend 90% of my time, let's say in Teams, then that's where I would expect to see more of my agents where I can interact with instead of having to constantly do and context switch, right? So from an extensibility standpoint, that's where I have my Copilot chat, which comes into the area of M365, admin center. I also have agents that I've built in any tool, whether Copilot Studio, Visual Studio, publish, and they're visible in my Copilot chat. And then I also have Agent Builder, which sort of natively the UI resides in Copilot chat as well. So in there, I have the M365 Admin Center. I have Teams Admin Center. I have Power Platform Admin Center for any agent that I built in Copilot Studio. And some point in time, this will also be, for SharePoint agents as well. So the way that we're approaching this is how do we delineate that line between governance at build time versus runtime? So if I'm building an agent, let's say in Copilot Studio, my build time governance in there is still very much tied to PPAC. So as a PPAC admin, I'm defining all the policies, rules, and also enforcing any kind of build time controls that are all part of either the policies that I built in or the controls that I can leverage from PPAC. But once that agent has been published and it's visible in some platform, which most of the time ends up being Copilot chat in Teams, then it becomes part of the Microsoft Admin Center ecosystem. So then at that point is it is part of a published agent landscape, and it's no different than any other integrated app that you will see that's part of that ecosystem. So a lot of what we are trying to do is lifecycle management, because now we are looking at an agent which already existed published versus build time enforcement and build time governance when the agent is actually being built. I could build an agent but never publish it. So it never becomes, a runtime thing where I have to worry about life cycle and all of that, right? But I still have to be able to govern it while it's being built. So what we are looking at right now is that is there a either an opportunity for seamless transition from one admin center to another? And that could simply be just as having visibility from a different type or a new role, such as an AI admin role, which sorts of, just blends between, let's say, PPAC, a Teams admin, or a M365 admin. And that is something which we're also looking at it from the perspective of, does that role alleviate some of the burdens that all of other admins have, and being able to look at across the agent landscape? Then the other thing that we're looking at is more in terms of which we're relying on different product teams, is on the back end, how seamless does it become? So if I have an agent that I built in Copilot Studio, but then I published it as a declarative agent in Copilot Chat, if I have to govern and impose lifecycle on it, I should be able to take any action on that agent in M365 Admin Center and have that operation cascade across the admin center, so I don't have to go and look at the same in Teams or in PPAC. So those are some of the areas of opportunities that we have that we are looking to optimize. But it is a question that, of course, our customers are asking, and we are right there with them to try to like solve this, because it will become a scalability problem too.
That's fascinating how you're literally like a baton almost. You're handing it off to
Yes.
different admins and coordinating that. And I want to emphasize that for our listeners because I think that's a level of maturity that we need to encourage people to get to. It sounds like you're still striving in that direction, even, but it's an evolution of how we've been managing Microsoft 365 historically, right? And our products. So governance has a purpose, right? And I think that oftentimes we get stuck in lock it down mode, right? Or no, or privacy or reviews. But the whole point of it is to securely enable innovation and development of the people. So I wanted to shoot over a little bit of a fun question here in the sense that you have clearly taken a stance where you have securely enabled people at Microsoft. What are some of the most fun or innovative or best examples of agents that you have seen built or that IT is maintaining for Microsoft?
Oh, that's a great question. Actually, I'll give you an example of some of the things that we are doing, which are fun in the sense that when we see it come to life, it's actually really reassuring, and also it's a little bit like amazing. So Microsoft, the entire compliance and security landscape is like vast, and the policies are enough to sort of, just drive anybody bananas that, oh my God, how do I possibly comply with that? So we are internally building an agent which actually does all of that for our users, which literally just guides them through the entire jungle of different type of requirements and all of the different actions that they need to do. So that agent, we're actually trying to make it fun, which is as the users interact with it, we do want to collect some sentiments and then leverage those sentiments to basically improve our processes. But some of the examples that we're actually I can share with you right now is that I personally put some of the questions in that agent to say that, so tell us like how you really feel about the compliance process. Tell us how you really feel about having to do an SDL and RAI. So that's like some of the fun things that we're injecting, but at the same time using it in a way to educate the users, right? And just bring their knowledge up a little bit that, hey, you might have heard a lot of that you can do this. I can't build in Copilot Studio in my tenant. So every time that agent actually starts an interaction, that's another thing. It's going to do a bunch of myth busting, Or it's like, yeah, have you heard that, you can actually build in Copilot Studio? If somebody tells you otherwise, please send them to XYZ. So those are some of the things that we're doing just to make it more interactive. But I think in terms of some of the other agents, that really cool ones that we have built internally is the employee self-service. I encourage users to go check out the Microsoft blog post on that. It's really a way for us to bring all of our any enterprise's internal processes to a very seamless single pane of glass view that I was mentioning before. Right now, of course, there are very segmented experiences as any employee. If I need to look at my vacation balance or if I need to look at my benefits, I have to go to 3 or 4 different disparate systems. And that if I'm trying to get anything done internally from a help desk perspective, I have to go somewhere else to a different system. So the employee self-service agent, which is, our Microsoft initiative, and we're looking at it as first party, is really help to solve that where I interact with one agent and in the back end, the handoff happens. So if I can start with asking, I want to update my address to what is my next paycheck look like, from there to I have an issue with my machine. How do I contact help desk? All's happening within the single pane. So those are some of the initiatives that we are taking, just not only to, increase the use of agent, but also really looking at actual business scenarios that we think where agent can be revolutionary and help us improve productivity.
One agent to rule them all.
Oh, please don't say that.
I think we're getting the hook from our producer right now that we need to wrap up. So, what I'll do real fast is one, I'm going to put you on the spot and say, hey, we need to do a part two because both Ken, Wendy, and myself, we've got a bazillion more questions for you, and new ones come up every day, honestly, that we'd like to pose to you. So, we really want to get you back on, and we'll make sure we have a part two for this because this is a huge topic for everyone. Just real fast, are there any resources that you would say, hey, this would be great as a new customer coming on board or existing customer that's now looking at rolling out agents that would help them? And we can drop it in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely. So our Inside Track articles, there's like a whole bunch that we've been doing in Microsoft Digital where we do touch upon some of our governance strategy. We also talk about how we are managing the sprawl of agents in our tenant. There are few resources that also dive deeper into the agentic experience when it comes to employee self-service. The other that I would recommend is start taking advantage of some of the controls that are available, that if you can, especially from the groups and rules perspective, and really getting to define your own environment strategy. Like we started leveraging sharing limits. We're actually Microsoft Digital was the biggest power behind this. Ken knows this, how much we annoyed him. That environment routing for Copilot Studio that we announced at the community conference in September, then sharing limits, and now we with the advanced DLP policy rolling out, all of that is just helping us improve our tenant strategy more and more. So in terms of resources, take a look at what's out there on the Copilot Studio blog, pay attention to quite a bit into what those controls are coming in, and then start to form your own all up governance framework. But I think that the best and the biggest resource that I would recommend is growth mindset's adaptability and constantly looking at not only where you are, but where you want to go from a business and tenant manageability perspective. We are every day challenging our tenant strategy as well. We thought we had it locked down, that we'll just have environment routing and groups and rules and it's going to solve all of our problems. But as new features are rolling out, we have to strike that balance between innovation, security, governance, and also continue to be that framework for our customers. So it's not said and done. So that I would say would probably be your biggest resource to continue to evaluate where you are and where you're going.
So you heard it here, everyone. Part two of this conversation is going to be planning ahead at scale for agents. So I think we know what the topic is going to be. Well, thank you so much for your time, and we can't wait to get you back to go and deep dive even more. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to it.